talking to you, you and I have been talking about, well, we've talked a lot about forgiveness and revision. Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard is the person that, for me, helped me connect dots around what forgiveness really was. I had done tons of personal development work, talked about, being responsible, living in responsibility, forgiveness, all of these things, done forgiveness work. So there's so many different ways of doing forgiveness work. You and I talked about the Ho'oponopono prayer, that method of healing, which is very similar to Neville's method of revision and forgiveness and all of these things. So it's not a new idea. This is not something that's like revolutionary and it's never been discussed before. It's actually been talked about for long periods of time, but there's been all of these, in my perspective, tons of little distortions around forgiveness and revision and what that actually looks like. And you and I have talked about some of those revelations, but something that's been coming up for me, specifically with regard to physical health, is basically like, I cannot be whole without forgiveness. And I know that you and I've talked about forgiveness, and there is this idea around revising past, like things that have already happened in our life. Whereas most people are going around doing forgiveness work and they're talking about like, I need to forgive so-and-so, I need to write a letter of forgiveness to so-and-so and whatever. But it never really resolves the issue so that they can move forward without having that trigger come up again and again and again, where they keep saying, well, I thought I had forgiven that, So forgiveness, just for anyone listening, in the most practical sense, is literally rewriting the past as though what hurt you never happened. Like the individual having the power to rewrite it and tell the story the way they want to, as though that hurtful thing, that traumatizing thing never had that impact. It didn't happen the way that we remember it, essentially. Is that the kind of explanation that would make sense to you?
Yeah. When I actually explained it to somebody that I work with not that long ago, and this woman had absolutely like been through the ringer with her parents. Like, I mean, really, like they were not like physically abusive, but so emotionally abusive and neglectful and, just not great, just decent people, she would say overall, but terrible parents. And so, we were talking about this idea of like revision forgiveness, and I was like, okay, so how could we revise this? And all the while I'm thinking in my head, it is not possible to revise this with these people. Like, this is not real life. Like, I don't know them. And I don't think I could come up with a scenario based off the things she's told me that we could revise this from. And so, she was like, okay, I'm going to think on this. I'm going to sit with it. And I'm like, okay. And so when we chatted again the next time, she was like, so I tried to like revise that with those people. She's like, and it was not real life. She's like, so I created a new family. She's like, I had a new mom and a new dad. She's like, I had an older brother, which I'd always kind of wanted. And I had a younger sister, which I had always kind of wanted. She's like, the older brother teased me a little bit, but was great and protective. She's like, little sister looked up to me and was kind of annoying, and it was fabulous. And my parents were supportive. She's like, they were strict and they were whatever, but they were supportive. She completely like redesigned her family in her mind. And when I tell you that this woman like was changed, I mean, like, she was changed. She went from somebody who was always looking at, oh, I do this, or I think this, or I feel this because of the way that my parents were, to somebody who didn't look at things that way or feel that way or whatever, just in the creation of this, new kind of family. So, I mean, that is an extreme like example of revision, but she revised her past. She revised her entire life story up until that point. It's
I'm
bananas.
telling you, I know it really is. And I've been like mulling this over and contemplating this, because it's like, I myself, because you've been front row at most of what's happened for me physically, just like working through physical ailments and things that I didn't understand, and then getting to the place of understanding like my body is healing itself and all that kind of stuff. And it's not been anything overly traumatizing. I know people have things that they go through in their life where physically it's so debilitating, and, you know, they deal with life-threatening disease and stuff like that. So I'm not here to, you know, blow it up beyond that, but it's been uncomfortable. And the other day I was thinking about revision, and I was thinking about, well, if my past, literally all of the happenings of my past are what make up this body that I'm in right now, which is what I believe. I believe that my body is just the outpicturing of all of the thoughts and beliefs that I have adopted about who I am based on where I come from and how I've identified with that. And so this is my experience. You know, this is what I'm experiencing and working through. And for a long time, I was just dealing with, okay, how do I just resolve this one thing? And then how do I heal this thing? And I did all the traditional things out there that are available. And then, of course, this year is when I started my prayer practice. I was like, I'm going to heal this all with prayer. I don't know how that is going to be exactly, but I'm about to heal all of this with prayer. And that has been a whole journey, but it's led me to this process of rewriting, revising things that were traumatizing to me. Because as I got into prayer and I was holding a vision of what I was choosing to be, other than what I had believed I was, what would come up for me was whatever was standing in the way of that idea. And it was always connected to something that had happened to me in the past, right? So I believe that one way or another, if you get really focused on being whole, that one way or another, the stuff is going to come up and you're going to have to address it. Either you go back and revise your past, which makes you a new person now, or you deal with working on the new concept of yourself now, and it makes you look at your past and go, well, we can't have that, because that could never have produced this version of you that you're attempting to hold.
Right.
So I don't know. What's been coming up for me is like, can you even heal without forgiveness? Like, can you actually move through into a new whole version of you without there being some sort of revision that must happen in your life? Either in the forward movement of this is who I'm going to be, which we revise, or the past, what we call the future and the past, which you know.
Yeah, all nonsense.
You know, but
yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yes. So I've been reading Neville's teacher, who you introduced me to, Walter Lanyon. I'm reading a book of his right now, and he's talking tons about personality, or what he calls the mask, versus permanent identity. And permanent identity, right, is you know, God in us, God expressing through us. And so I was thinking about that concept of personality and mask, actually, because of what Kenna said the other night in at our prayer group. And something we've talked about it before, but I just loved the way that she said, so if I drop out my personality and, you know, all these beliefs and all these whatever kind of stuff, then I'm without limitation. Like, and just, you know, she's Kenna, so it's super like matter of fact, like, yeah, that's what it is.
Right.
And that is how I think about this whole concept of revision too. Like, I tend to make things as difficult as humanly possible for myself. So if I'm talking to somebody else, I will try to simplify it and break it down to its most basic, like, here's how it works, here's how it goes. But if I am like putting in a practice for myself, I'm like, okay, I need to do this step and then this thing. And so when I started the revision process, right, that is immediately kind of how I started it. It was like, we're going to be very disciplined and there's a structure to this and there's whatever. And then the more I'm reading like Lanyon and thinking about like the way that like Kenna said it, it's basically just like, we drop out these things that are false, basically, right? And I mean, how do we know it's false? Well, that's the thing that comes up, right? If that's the thing that's popping up in you over and over again, then we just drop that out. And if we drop that out through revision or calling it a lie, which is another form of revision, like whatever it looks like, there's no process that says, like with the lady that I worked with, like, oh, I have to go back and create this elaborate scenario or whatever. Sometimes the revision is, oh, that's a lie. And this is what's true. Let me walk in that.
Right.
Right. Like, I don't know. Like, so I think it can be like a complex thing. And like the way that the lady that I worked with, the way that she talked about it was, she's like, I think that there's elementary level stuff here. And then I think that there's graduate level work here. Like, and here's the funny part, right? The elementary level stuff is the stuff with all the steps and all the discipline and all the rigor. And the graduate work is just being like, that's not true. That's not real. This is what is. Let me walk in this truth.
Yes. I'm reminded of months ago, I think I shared this with you. I had been processing through some feelings that kept coming up around shame that I was holding and carrying, specifically with regard to the relationship that I'm in now, because Bo is so loving and good and kind. And I mean, so just such a good person, you know? And there was this part of me that was struggling with deserving that. And like, oh my God. And of course, you know, there's one part of me that's like, of course, this is what I would have in my life. I've always known I deserve this, but dang, my life did not reflect that, you know? And now here I am receiving it. And so he and I had a conversation one night, and I shared the thoughts that were coming up around feeling ashamed of being in this relationship and feeling undeserving of the love and the goodness and the kindness. And he was really surprised to hear it, but he was also, you know, comforting like he normally is. And so we talked about that. But I remember before I went to sleep that night that I was asking, like, where did this come from? What is this about? Because I don't believe it's mine. I don't believe that Jody was born as this shameful being. So where's this shame coming from? And immediately it took me, and my mind is so interesting the way that it works. I always feel like I'm like being flung into my ancestral past, you know, and I like go to this place where I'm with my grandmother, and I'm like in a space with her who she's no longer present in this physical reality. But this was like a long time ago, and I'm witnessing her. It's like she doesn't know I'm there, but I'm witnessing her, and I hear her saying, I don't deserve anything good. I don't deserve anything good, and I don't deserve to be happy. And she was just like feeling heavy about it. And it felt like she was alone in that. So it could have just been an internal thought that I was witnessing that was hers. But I was like, oh my gosh. Because then I was seeing that it had come from somewhere else. It wasn't even hers. It had been handed down to her. And she handed it off to my mom. And then here I am, you know, wanting good things and then feeling internally like, but I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve anything good. I don't deserve love. And I told you, I think after like that realization, I was like, oh my God, I was literally just about killing myself because of the conflict that was happening. I was having such a good experience in my external life, holding this insidious belief of I don't deserve this. And the conflict is so real, the body just erupts and is like, we can't hold both things. We can't hold life is good and we can't have good things. Like there's a massive conflict there. So I had to work at rooting that out, that belief out. And when I say work at it, at first it was like spending my prayer time around recultivating that. But then over time, it just became very much like, I'm dropping that. I don't even need that. It isn't mine. I don't need to spend time here, you know, integrating that. I don't need to spend time trying to soften it or, you know, understand it more, understand what she was going. I don't need to do that. I just need to see it for the lie that it is and be like, and I'm not carrying it anymore. That is not mine, you know? And so that has been a whole process of like just being very clear cut in why am I ruminating on all of these things when I can witness what they are, see what the problem is, and then I'm trying to ruminate and understand it. It's like, no, that does me no good. I don't need to understand this. We're just going to go ahead and let that go and keep focusing on the direction I want to be in, which is I absolutely deserve love and good things and to be happy. And I get to enjoy life, you know? Yeah. So when you're talking about revision, that was the first time that stuff started to come up in me where it was like, ooh, shame is so present and so real. And I think it's one of the things that drives us underneath so much of our feelings and emotions and thoughts about ourselves. And it was like, a huge, you know, flashing light in my space of like, here's what it is. You're feeling ashamed for enjoying your life because you're carrying a thought that you're not supposed to and you don't get to. And it can be that simple, you know? And of course there's people been through so many things and they're carrying a ton of things. I'm not here to try to minimize that, but I do think that we spend way too much time trying to resolve these past issues when we realize what they are and understanding them and getting to know them better. And, it just doesn't help us at all. So it was like I had to learn even then how to move through it more quickly. And that's why I like revision, because it does, like you said, it has the potential. There's like beginner level and then there's like, master level, you know what I mean? But it has the potential to just change things so quickly. And it's just been, like I said, coming up for me that it's like, can you even have the healing you're seeking if you cannot do this one thing? I think people are sleeping on revision. I mean, I'm not kidding, because it's like, we did this as kids. We
All the
imagined,
time.
we were constantly reinventing things, imagining our life, imagining our circumstances. And for some people, it became an escape and it became toxic because there wasn't any real, like, I understand I can have this in my life. It's like, let me just escape reality and go live in this imaginary place. And then I'm shut down while I'm here. So this is not that. This is actually like, no, I am changing my entire experience of life on purpose. And yeah, I just started to think like, man, forgiveness is the ultimate vindicator, like really erases all the blame and all the crap. You can't get there without it, but it's not the way that people talk about it. And there's just such a misconception about what it is because it's so powerful, in my opinion, in my experience.
But also, so I just recently had a conversation with my son, with Landon, who's, he's 16. And we were talking about this concept of revision. And he is like, so it doesn't bother you, this thought of just like living in a land of make-believe? And I thought about his response. He's a very practically minded, like logical, whatever person. And I was, sitting there and I was thinking, no wonder that we stop revising as children. No wonder that we stop, because his response was the quintessential societal response, right? It was just absolutely like, out of the mouth of babes, here comes, this society's, just brush off of this technique, of this thing. And so I said, well, I mean, what makes reality then? Like, what makes reality? Like, what he's really like scientific and stuff. Okay, so what would science say makes reality? He's like, well, it depends on who you ask, but it's probably simulation like, and and we're talking about that. Okay, great. Well, in a simulation, right? Who creates your reality? And he's like, well, you do. And I'm like, okay, awesome. How do you do that? He's like, well, you decide what you want and you work for it, and very traditional response, right? And so I'm like, okay, but what if our thoughts are more powerful than that? What if our subconscious is more powerful than that? I'm like, do you agree that the subconscious is powerful? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so then what if in our imagination, which is part of our subconscious, right, we can go in and make things happen the way that we want to do that? He's like, well, then why wouldn't everyone do that? And I'm like, that's just it, right? We never want to do the thing that's simple. Like, if I tell somebody like, if it's like they want to feel better, I'm like, awesome, put down your phone and go to bed at a reasonable hour. Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to feel better, but I don't want to do that. So, because it's simple, but it's not doing something. And I think that is the thing, is that we have so much programming. We have so much in our masks, in our personalities, around this programming of that we have to do something, that we have to strive for something, we have to work for something, we have to hustle for something. Everything has to be a struggle. And I think that this really runs counter to that. And I think that we automatically, consciously, subconsciously, all of the above, we lump it into that too good to be true category. And when we get in our minds, right, that something is too good to be true, that's another subconscious belief. That's another layer of that mask. That's another, you know what I mean? Like, instead of taking off a mask, we're just putting another layer on it.
Exactly. As you were saying that, it was reminding me of when I was in the throes of my own personal development journey. And something that would be said often was like, who do you want to be? Who are you working to become? It's not about the goal. It's what happens to you along the way as you're working to the goal. And that is a way, right? People can use that way of doing things, but it's going to constantly keep you and I've talked about this, pushing the goalpost over and over and over again. Oh, got there. No, let me push the goalpost again. I'm not saying that's wrong or bad. It's just a way. But what we're talking about is essentially where you become so transformed internally that there's no goalpost conversation, because your life is brand new. And now your thought process, your way of being and existing in the world is just potentially, if you could imagine it, expansive and, dare I say, unlimited, if I'm going to go that far. But I thought about how many times it was like, well, who would you become? If you were going to have this thing in your life, who would you have to become to be that, to have that thing? And, it gets you thinking, like, I would have to become, confident, and I would have to become all these things. Yes, those things are true. But I think what you said already is so important in this little small way, is that it teaches people to put on a new personality. It's the fake it till you make it idea. And again, I'm not saying that idea is entirely erroneous. It's a way. But is it the easiest way? I don't believe so. Right. I don't believe it.
Well, is it a way that's possible for everyone? I don't think everyone can fake it till they make it. I just don't think that. I think there are people who, so I'm not one of those people. Like, I'll just say that if I have this big gap, this big dissonance between who I know that I am right now and who I'm pretending to be, nothing will throw me into a state of like anxiety and depression and all of those things faster than that dissonance, than experiencing that dissonance over and over and over again as I try to fake my way to something. Like, I am not one of those people. So like, yay for somebody if that's a technique that acts as a bridge to get them someplace. I won't knock it. I'm sure that way works for people. But I also think that there are other people like me out there who, the moment that they try that fake it till they make it stuff, it feels wrong. And the same, I was thinking about this because I'm like, I don't remember what space I was in, but somebody was talking about how they were not in a great space because they weren't doing the things that they know help them. Like if it was like, I'm not listening to the right music, or I'm not, praying, or I'm not, whatever practice, whatever thing that they normally do. And I was thinking about that too. Like, I fail under those circumstances as well. And like, I'm super disciplined. I'll do all the things. Like, I will make myself the list and do the list every single day. But if it doesn't feel like it is authentic to me, if I'm being genuine, if I'm trying to cultivate something in that way, I can't do it. Like, there's a gap there, and I will feel that gap every single time. And then I focus on that gap, and then I focus on where I'm at versus where I want to, I just go into a spiral with it. Like, It does not work for me. And so I'm like, I love the whole concept of revision because it allows for me anyways, you basically get to transport from point A to point B, and you're at point B. There's no bridge I have to walk. There's no gap that I'm falling through. It really is like a transporter between point A and point B.
Absolutely. And what I have found, the reason fake it till you make it is not the one that I subscribe to, is because what I found in my process was I tried the fake it till you make it, and it did not work. I failed miserably at that. Because internally, I did not believe myself to be that thing. So that's the problem I have with fake it till you make it, because if you're faking it, then you don't believe it's real, and you're wearing that costume until you somehow stretch the fabric enough that it finally feels comfortable, however long.
If you ever do, right? Because like, I just felt like a fraud the entire time. I'm like, wow, I am like, I don't even know. I'm just an actress. That's it. Like, my life is the stage and I'm the actress. Here we go. Well, it's like when people are having the worst time of their life and they're like, well, I'm just going to smile. I'm like, how's that working for you? Right? Like, just based off of like striving. I think that's the thing. I'm not saying that you can't change where you're at. You can't change your circumstances, your whatever. But I just don't think that you get there by playing pretend, by playing make believe in that way.
I don't either. And honestly, in the places that it was promoted that I was participating in, the idea was find someone who has what you want, that you want to emulate. So again, it's like, this isn't even about your authentic self. This is about how you can morph yourself into that idea of whatever you think that person is, and go after what they have and how they did it and learn from them. It's just very, you know, it's the long way around, because eventually it's going to smack you up to yourself and you're going to have to go, none of this works for me. I have to do it the real way. I have to find my way to what's real and true for me. And that's what I've witnessed happen over and over and over again. It always brings you back to yourself, sometimes violently and painfully, where it's like, no, you can't keep doing this because this isn't true to you. You are a vessel that is manifested as this intelligence that we all have access to. Why are you literally abandoning your own intelligence, trying to emulate the intelligence of another? And then, yeah, it's just messy. It's just a whole thing. So for me, believing to the point that I feel that it is real for me is the sauce. Like, that's it. That's what gets it done. And that's why if you can understand how to use revision properly, at first it might feel like a fairy tale, but you and I had this conversation the other night in our prayer group, was I can't let myself get bogged down in all the little nitty gritty details in that revision process, because that's when it starts to get really hard for me to like be like, I could hold all of this and it could happen exactly like this, instead of just being like, how do I want it to be done? Like, done. It's done. And I know it's done. So what's the simplest way for me to feel this thing done?
Yep.
You know, is it receiving a congratulations from someone about it being done? Is it me feeling excited that something was done and accomplished? Like, what is it? Those are the ways that I have to like work myself to when it comes to revision. And I have to say, it is something that I am having so much fun with. And getting to spend some time during my prayer practice of utilizing the tool of revision is just, I haven't become obsessive. Like, let me go change everything in my life. Let me recall every memory of everything I didn't want, and then let me go change them all. It's just as things come up in my regular practice, and I notice that I'm butting up against, honestly, a limitation that's in me based on an erroneous belief, which is based on an idea that got planted in there a long time ago. And I let myself be open to, well, how far back can I go to this? You know, how far back does this go that I can go? And then letting myself be shown, or having, you know, that little moment of like, oh, it was this thing, or it was this, whatever. Maybe I was present for it. Maybe I wasn't. Getting some insight. And then asking my soul to really show me what's the simplest way to revise this. And that has helped me so much, because suddenly I'm just like, I just want to see this person or myself or the scenario with this energy, this idea, this feeling. That's all I want, you know? So whatever has to be undone that's connected to this, let's get that undone, because this is what I actually want to have the experience of. So anyway, that's what's been going on for me, because I'm like, dude, I can't keep walking around in a body that's like half working half the time, riddled with anxiety or confusion or panic or sickness or anything, and think that I'm just going to keep using new food, or I'm just going to keep going and making sure I do the right exercise, or I'm just going to make sure I wake up in the morning and see the sunrise, because that's so important. And I'm like, it's not that it's not important, but you're trying to develop a new habit wearing an old mind.
Yep.
And it doesn't work, you know? It just belabors the process, in my opinion. Like, you got to deal with the thing.
Yeah.
You know,
you're changing things from the outside in, and things from the outside in, that, I mean, can you change some things from the outside in? Sure. Do they last? Maybe, maybe not. Like, but are other things going to just continually pop up? Yeah. I mean, to me, that's what's going to happen. I think you've revised more stuff like in the past, like, than I have. I'm not great about that for a lot of reasons. Like, I don't remember tons of my childhood. Thank God, probably. And the parts that the parts that I do, I'm like, I don't even want to go back to try to figure out how I would go about revising that. Like I would probably be a lot like the woman I worked with and have to literally create an entirely new life for myself somehow. Like, and that's exhausting. And I just don't want to. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I have no desire to go back. So I'm a huge like forward reviser. Like that's my secret sauce with it. And I was thinking about what you just said about the body thing. And my favorite way to start doing stuff with body stuff is I always imagine myself having a conversation with somebody that's in the space that I am right now. And I'm where I want to be. And I'm talking them through the process of how I got to where I am.
Yes, I love it.
That's my favorite form of revision for that. Or like, somebody else that I know suffers from like anxiety or whatever. And I was like, so I said, imagine having a conversation with a friend, who's kind of going through an anxious time and being like, yes, I used to deal with that. And it's been years. And here's how I kind of overcame that. Here's how I got past it. She was like, yes, that's brilliant. And for me, that kind of forward revision, it's just one of the easiest ways because like when we revise, we need to have a clear indicator, like our subconscious mind, our conscious mind, all of it together needs to have a clear indicator that we have achieved the desired result, or as like Neville calls it, the wish fulfilled. Like, yes. What's your indicator? What's your clear indicator that I know I have arrived because I have this thing? And I'm like telling somebody else like that like, I don't deal with that anymore. Like, I haven't been through that in years, but here's what I did. But like, here's how I went about revising this thing. And I think that's cool on all kinds of fronts too, because then, you're also sharing that idea of revision with that imaginary person. You're like passing it on, like putting it out there, which I think is fabulous. But then it's that clear indicator that's like, I have what I want. I've arrived. Mm-hmm. They say that like, if you want to sell a house, and you're trying to, revise an outcome of like, oh, the market's terrible right now. You're never going to get the amount of money that you want for it, blah, 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 whatever. Imagine holding a check for the amount of money that you wanted and shaking hands and being like, it was lovely doing business with you. Boom. Like, and I think that's the thing is, I think sometimes when we can hear people talk about revision, it can sound like it has to be this huge, detailed process. Yeah. And like, I don't know, like, and I won't say I cannot because I'm sure I could figure it out, but I'm not a person who likes to spend tons of time in a process with something unless that just naturally comes to me about it. I don't want to sit and try to cultivate that experience. So like the shortest way from point A to point B so that I can know that this is what I've achieved. Once you see it in your imagination, you can already just accept that it's already like, I say now, like it's already the past, but it's already coming for us at least. Like if that's hard to get into, if that mentality is hard to get into, that it's already in the past, then like, okay, then it's already on the horizon for you, right? For you to be able to see it in the physical world.
I love this because this is what's helping bring all this together for me, because what you're describing, I love that technique so much. And it is so simple and so clear cut. In fact, I hadn't even read all of this from Neville a year ago. But what you're talking about is exactly steps I took. Bo did as well, which is what moved us across the country. It's what got us where we are, all of that. We were doing a form of that. It was probably a little bit more complicated, but it was very future focused and feeling focused, like super feeling focused. And then started reading Neville and him talking about so many things. I love the story he tells about wanting to go to Barbados to visit his family. And,
yes.
Abdullah, like doing the whole thing and encouraging him about like, no, you're already there. I already see you there,
Yeah. Feel the sand underneath your toes, like feel the salt water in your hair. Like you are there, feel it, own it. Yeah.
That started to change things that we began to create for ourselves here, and things that we wanted, things that we wanted to see accomplished. It is so effective. It works so well. When you are speaking right now, I'm like, oh, this is what is happening for me personally is being in this place where I've created and generated these new ways of living and being. And I feel like what's happening for me is the graciousness of God showing me like, okay, you're here, you're holding these things, and you're still trying to hold some of these other things. So we need to resolve this, which is why, and of course, you know, at the time that I was listening to Neville's stuff, it wasn't that I really I did not have a full grasp of forgiveness or revision at that time. I was still doing these like very intentional, what most people call manifestation, you know, and all that stuff, utilizing prayer. But now I'm just like sitting here listening to you. I'm like, okay. I get it. Because there's things in me that want to hold on, that want to be part of the story, and they can't be part of this story, you know? And I'm like, oh, I get it, you know? And I will say my favorite thing to do is to be in that future space. That feels so good. And I have been doing it lately just for things that I'm wanting to create and experience. But I felt like having this conversation around revision was so powerful because I don't feel like it's not explained well. There's a lot of people that don't share experience around what they're learning and practicing. And I've shared some things with you and you've shared things with me where it's like, I'm using this and then I'm watching things change in my reality, like literally change. And it's like, whoa, that was just 2 days ago that I was praying this prayer. And now this person is showing up saying the things that I was praying a couple of days ago. And it's like, oh, this actually happens really fast when you stop faking it to make it. And you start believing that that is your life, that that is who you are.
Yeah.
You know,
and stop striving and stop hustling and stop all of those other things. And I know that, and this is going to freak people out because if I would have heard this, you know, a year ago, whatever, I would have been like, what? Because like I said, I'm super disciplined and I'm like, I like a practice and I like a structure and I like all of these things. And so I'm not just saying like, we just have to just sit around and, you know, do nothing. But I think that there is so much peace that comes from once I cultivate that future scape for myself, whatever you want to call it. There's so much peace that comes from knowing that God architects these things like that we envision. And not just that we sit around and do nothing, right? Because we're partners in it. But I think that the way that things start to happen, just take that striving out. And that'll be hard for some people, like, because it was hard for me. Like, wait a minute, I need to be doing XYZ thing. I need to be, okay, well, if you need to be doing anything, you need to be sitting in that quiet moment, right? You need to be still and know that I am God, right? Like that's the big thing. And Neville says that, right? Like that's number, be still and know that I'm God. Yeah. Sit in it, sit with that. When like what you teach in the prayer circle, right? I and my Father are one. Yes. I and my Father are one. Let's sit in that and create from that space. Like that's the work, you know, whatever we want to call work. And it's just, it doesn't look anything like that striving that we get taught that is necessary in order to have what we want to have.
It's so interesting because I will say in my experience of working with people through the years, when I would bring this very concept up that you're talking about right now, you start speaking about ease to people in their life and something inside of them just goes up and is like, no, can't hear it because I must be doing something. Everything I look at says I have to be doing something. These are the steps to wealth, the steps to successful relationships, the steps to this, the steps to that. There has to be something. I'm like, well, I'm not saying there isn't a process. But what I'm saying is the one you're using doesn't get you what you actually are after. If you're saying you're wanting freedom and you're going to a process that is arduous to have freedom, those two things are diametrically opposed.
Right.
You know, if you want wealth, but you're crunching numbers and adding things up and getting rigid with how you handle money, you don't understand wealth.
Yeah.
And that's a bold thing. I know people are going to be like, oh, well, look, I'm just telling you right now, there is an energy and a frequency that is attractive, that really pulls that stuff not into your life, out of you, so that you get to have it in your life, because it's already all in there, you know?
Yeah.
And it isn't constriction, obviously. I mean, we know this. You could go turn the hose on outside and you tie it up, water is going to trickle or not come out at all. But we do this to ourselves internally, thinking we're going to get there.
Right.
Make it make
This
sense.
This is gonna get us there. This is gonna get us there. This penny pinching. Yeah, I think I heard a long time ago somebody said, if wealth is your goal, don't worry about spending less. Focus on getting more. I'm like, yes, that. And it's just a completely different energy shift, right? Like spending less. Yeah, it does. It pulls everything in tight and close and constricted. If you think about like, okay, so how can I expand to earn more for these things that I want? It's such a simple, like that's such a simple concept, but people will freak out about that. And people freak out about the ease. But you and I've talked so much about how that is the ease is the energy of abundance. It's the energy of being able to receive abundance. Like you cannot receive when everything is tight and closed and, you know, fearful and contracted. Like we are in a place to receive when we're in that place of ease. So and it's a practice for sure.
It is such a practice, because I think the two things that confuse people, and it's just because they are choosing to be confused about it, but it's the idea of structure and ease. Because I believe that the way that God moves is so ordered and so perfect, but it is so easy. It's just so gentle and so easy and organic is the word I usually use for that, which means it just has its own process that feels very natural. It is not forced. And when that force gets focused and like it gets put into a little space, which is what we do when we start getting really, you know, strict in our approach, and we start mistaking discipline for punishment, and we start doing all of these things, then it breaks down the potency of that power, and it can't do what it's meant to do, you know? And I think as humans, we are so codependent. This is the thing. Codependence is about the need to control, right? And so that's us with God. You know, this idea that we need to control God without understanding our own personal power in controlling what happens in our mind. Like if we would just start wrangling our imagination and moving it in the direction we wanted to, and understand that is our control, that is under our control.
Yep.
People always say like, I can't control the future. Yes, you can.
Right. Right.
I can't change the past. Yes, you can.
Yes,
you know,
you can.
it's called forgiveness. It's called revision. It's called manifestation. It's called prayer. It's called intentional living. So those things are all erroneous lies. And they soothe us for a little while when we feel like life is out of control. When it's happening to us, you know, it's like, well, I can't control that. Well, yes, you can, actually.
And you always could. And if that's a hard pill
now.
Yeah, that's a hard pill to swallow, right? Because I will tell people that. Take a look at your life right now. Every single thing in it, you have manifested that. You have created that. This was your vision at some point, knowingly or unknowingly, right? By default, like what I'm listening to right now, he's talking tons about how either we're perpetuating or we're creating. So if we're perpetuating, it's just all the old stuff being recycled over and over again. The old beliefs, the old programs, the old traumas, the old whatever, they're just getting recycled, and we're just perpetuating them onto the future over and over again. Or we're getting intentional and we're creating something new.
Exactly.
And those two things do not coexist well. Right. No. And I think, and we'll come up against a lot of stuff if we're over here saying, I want to create this, but there's part of me that still wants to perpetuate this. We have to be ready to let that go in order to get onto this part of it. Like I can't hold on to these old things in the past, these old wounds, these old programs, I can't hold on to all of that and take off this mask and really step into my permanent identity, my true identity.
Right.
It doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. And it's so frustrating. We are the creators of the conflict we're trying to solve. We're creating it and trying to solve it all at the same time. Like it's so wild to watch us do this, you know? And it's just because we get distracted with this world that we're in, this world of senses. You said this the other night and I loved it so much. And you were talking about like we're not supposed to be invested in what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, because all that could ever do is affirm what we already believe.
Mhm.
That's all it can do. It's
Yeah.
not showing us anything. But you added this one part, and this was so wonderful to me. And you were like, but we also can't trust our sense of feeling, this feeling, our emotion about everything,
Mhm.
because it's not always accurate.
Mm-mm.
And what's it dictating in our lives, you know? And I was just like, man, that is so needed because what a controversial thing to say right now in the
Yeah.
climate that we've been in that is so feeling focused.
Mhm.
And I don't believe that you were saying this, and I don't think it's about that your feelings don't matter, but I think it's about when you let your feelings rule.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah. Well, when you let any of the senses rule, it's a problem, right? Like, I think what I read, I ended up making a note of it on my phone because it was powerful to me, and I don't know that it would be powerful, but we're supposed to live apart from the evidence of the senses, all of them, all
All
of them. And that's the thing is, I am like I'm a feely person, right? On the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFJ, which they say is the personality type that's too thinky for the feelers and too feely for the thinkers. Like, where do we fit? But I'm a feeling oriented person. I judge a lot of things by like, okay, how do I feel about this? You know, what are my thoughts on this? How do I feel about this? Those are questions I ask myself a lot. And I've spent a lot of time asking those questions. And I got into a place over the last like month or two where I felt heavy and I felt, low and I felt stuck and I felt all of these things. And I spent a lot of time looking at and feeling those things instead of remembering that that's just another sense, right? That's another sense, AKA another perpetuation of my past, another perpetuation of my trauma, another perpetuation of my programming, another perpetuation, iteration, whatever you want to call it, of that mask.
right.
That's what that is. And I am just being content to wear it and stare at it in the mirror. That's what that is, right? I was just being content to wear it and stare at it in the mirror instead of being like, this is not who I am. Maybe this is who I was, but this is not who I am now. What am I creating for myself now instead?
Right.
Like, who am I now? And when I say who am I now, I don't mean like from a feeling place. I mean, when I close my eyes and I see that future, that what I will say future self, that future scape of myself, that is who I am. That is who I am. Go back to that place then as often as is necessary to revise those old feelings. And it was like, once I remembered that and I got back into that, I was like, okay, so does the heavy feeling 100% go away? No, I still feel it right now. Like right now, there's still a little bit of that, but I know exactly what that is. Oh, that's my past. That's a perpetuation of that, right? I am shedding that in the creation of something new, right? And a snake does not shed all of its skin all at one time. If I don't know if anybody ever watched that thing, like that thing will trail along behind it as it just peels off piece by piece. And I'm like, that's what's happening to me. And I can remember that and I can think about that analogy and think about, I'm shedding this right now and I'm seeing it and feeling it. Yes. Because does a snake know what they're shedding? Yeah, I'm sure they know when they're shedding their skin, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm feeling the shedding of something old, that perpetuation in favor of this creative experience.
Yeah. It's so massive, but exciting to me, like to get to have these kinds of conversations because there is so much that's available. And I feel like in my experience, especially over the last few years in spaces that we've been in and conversations that we've been in with people, there's a stuckness that happens because of this need to resolve things without understanding how to resolve things.
Right.
You know, like I need this to be cleared out, but I'm going to take the long way around about it. I'm going to look at it from every angle. I'm going to try multiple modalities to try to get rid of it instead of just calling it out for the lie that it is.
Right.
And going, it hurt. I didn't like it. That is not who I want to be. I don't want to be attached to that anymore. We are so, you and I have had this conversation so many times, Shannon, that everything that we come up to, the very next thing, it's always an identity conversation.
Yeah.
It is always tell me who I am.
Yeah.
It is always show me who I am. What does that mean about me? Right? We love to make meaning. I said this to you in a message the other day about nervous system work and the comparison between humans and animals being that humans need to understand why the trauma happened. Whereas animals are like, it happened, shake it off. You know, an animal could be running for its life and then shake that off and then just go on about its business, not holding on to it, nothing. But
they're not trying to make meaning out of it. They're not trying to they're not trying to be like, what about me attracted in this thing that
right.
No.
And a lot of people believe that they have to understand their own psyche so that they can prevent it from happening in the future. So let me go fully understand everything that made me so that I can avoid that. It's like, well, you know you don't want it, so that's the only thing you need to know in order to avoid it. I don't want that.
Right.
I don't need to know. The other day, Kenna and I were talking, and she said, I have these thoughts and these feelings, and I just don't know where they come from. And I said, who cares where it comes from? And she's like, well, I want to understand where it came from because, you know, I want to know that, you know, that I don't go to that again. And I said, that's not how you change it. You're going to have to repattern yourself altogether, you know, instead of going, well, I got that was handed down to me from so-and-so or such and such.
Yeah. And
yeah, what is that going to change?
Because we're using our meaning maker for the wrong thing. That's really what it is, right? I'm like, we have a meaning maker for a reason. That meaning maker, that thing that separates us from the animals, is because we have the ability to create our reality. They don't. We have this ability to create our reality. So we're supposed to use this meaning maker to make the life we want. We're supposed to make our life meaningful, you know, based off of the things that we want. And instead, we're over here using our meaning maker to make meaning out of things that don't matter. Like, this doesn't matter. This is a distraction. It's a total waste of time. Like, get off that idea and go use your meaning maker to make real meaning in your life.
Exactly. This is the thing that I'm saying. It's like, it's a collective bottlenecking. Like, let's stop right here. Let's park. Let's assess. Let's talk about it. Let's feel it. Let's do this. Let's do that. And look, if that is helpful to you and it can clear it so you can effectively move on, good. But what I mostly see is people are using these tools and then they find their ways to spin back around and let's talk about it some more. Let's keep identifying ourselves with it. And I wrote this recently on Instagram and I just said, there is no way for you to effectively create what you're wanting to create in your life while you still retell the stories of your past.
Yep.
Literally any of them. I mean, any of them. And, you know, people are like, well, I had some good times and I had, well, great and wonderful. But as long as you keep relating to that version of you, while you're also trying to create a new experience in your life, you are creating your own conflict.
Right. Because why aren't you still there? I said this to somebody last night. I was literally having a conversation with somebody and she was like, well, I loved my life back then. And I'm like, did you? Because now you're here in this place where you think everything's falling apart and it's horrible. And something about who you were then when you loved your life got you here now. Right? Because on some level, you were still perpetuating your old programming, your old trauma, your old whatever. And I'm like, you were asleep somewhere in your life. Right? Wake up. It's time to wake up. Wake up and fine. If there are parts of your life that you loved before that you want to redesign for yourself, great. It's still going to look different because you're still not that same person that you were then. Like, and also whenever people say like, oh, I just want to go back to, I'm always like, what? Why?
It's
Why? Like,
impossible.
let's move forward. Let's create moving forward. Like, it's just such a weird thing to me. Like, oh, I want to go back. I'm like, so did Lot's wife, and look what happened to her. Like,
Exactly.
pillar of salt, enough said. Like, if that doesn't tell us everything that we need to know about going back, we're not supposed to go back. We're supposed to go forward. So, like, what are you creating for yourself right now? Now that you're awake, now that you see this stuff, now that you know the difference between perpetuating and creating, are you going to be content with those areas of your life where that perpetuating programming still wants to lead the way?
My goodness. Every time I ever tried to go back in my life, back to a relationship, back to a job, back to anything, girl, it spit me out faster than the first time and it hurt worse.
Yeah.
Every single time. Because it was like life was going, what are you doing over here?
Yes.
You know, because
You
I would
are in the wrong place. You are in the wrong place.
you're in the
Yeah.
wrong place and you're trying to, you know, conceal what you're actually doing and being like, nothing to see over here. I'm just going to go pretend like this is something new. I'm going to dress it up different. I'm
Right.
going to do the same thing, but it's going to look a little different. And I'm going to act like it's forward moving. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, that is false. And every person, people have been in my life and they're like, I miss such and such thing. I miss such and such person. I really feel like I should, you know, connect with them again, do this and that. And I'm like, if you're not there right now, you are romanticizing something, first of all. It wasn't good the first time. And now you're lying to yourself. You know why? Because you are afraid to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
You're just afraid to move forward. And
Yeah.
something has shut you down. That happens all the time. How do I break free from that? Let me break free. I said this in, I think it was in our prayer circle, but I definitely said it in a session that I was doing recently. Someone was bringing up a challenge that they had and kind of like having that ruminating, like, I'm not sure like where this is coming from and blah, blah. And I said, hold on. I said, I saw this the other day. I thought it was genius. I have to say it here. Imagine you are bitten by a snake and your immediate response is to go hunt down the snake and ask it why you deserve to be bitten instead of trying to cure yourself of the poison that's in your body that's trying to kill you.
Right.
This is literally, in my view, what most of the healing that's happening in the world today is doing.
Yep.
So examine, let's look at it, let's understand it better, let's do this. Maybe you need that. Maybe you need to do that. I don't know. But the issue is there's poison in there and it's gonna kill you if you don't get it out. So let's address the wound and heal the wound so then you don't need to know why it happened.
Yes. Yeah. And let's take that snake analogy just one step further and say that all of the African bush people, you know, when they're worried about like mambas and all of the crazy things over there that bite and kill and whatever, they say that the best way to deal with a snake bite is to sit down, to get quiet, and to get as still as you possibly can. Because that venom stops circulating so quickly through your system, right? Like if you see an animal get bit by a snake, what happens a lot of the time? They pass out. They go to sleep like immediately. Like you see a honey badger get bit by a viper or whatever, that thing passes out and goes to sleep, wakes up several hours later, it's hungry, it's going to get food, it's doing its own thing again, right? And they say it's the same thing for people. That's like you sit down, you get still, and you get quiet. And I think this just brings us like full circle to this concept of, okay, well, how do you get the poison out? You be still and know that I'm God. Right? We don't have to strive for that either. We don't have to strive. I don't have to run around in circles trying to figure out how to get the poison out. I need to do the one thing that's probably most uncomfortable to most of us anyways. I don't know if it is for other people like it is for me, but for the longest time, if somebody told me, well, the way to kind of get through that is to get real still and get real quiet with yourself. And I'd be like, oh, screw that. I'm out. Like, what can I do? What else can I do? Give me an action list. Like, but it really is, I and my Father are one. Be still and know that I am God. get
Mhm.
into that place, go back to that place. I was having an area just of resistance with something this morning, and everything was like, okay, so what do I do? What do I do for this? And everything in me was like, you know exactly what to do. Just stop fighting that. And so I did. I went, I put on actually your kind of centering meditation. And I just put that on and like got centered, got focused, and then just sat in that stillness. After that meditation was over, just sat in that stillness for a while and was like, okay. And I just felt like I came back to myself. So it's like, I just tell people now, like, if you're spiraling, if you're, all of those things, do the one thing that you're probably most resistant to, right? The most resistant to. I'm like, just know I and my Father are one. Be still and know that I am God.